For more now on the Istanbul terror attack, we turn to our senior national security analyst, Juan Zarate in Washington. Juan, again, investigators and Turkish officials are now saying it's likely that ISIS is responsible, though the Islamic State has not claimed responsibility as yet. What questions, then, are officials asking today? What clues are they looking for?
Well, Josh, first and foremost, they're looking at the forensics around the attack, the methodology, the identity of the individuals who were involved. That's going to play a big part. They're also looking at any intelligence around this event, any chatter. They're listening for any clues as to who may have been involved. And they're likely putting together other pieces of information from intelligence sources outside of Turkey, all of which likely points to ISIS. ISIS, of course, has demonstrated an ability to attack in Turkey. They've called on followers to attack during the month of Ramadan. In the English language publication Dabiq, they've talked about Turkey as a key target. And of course, Turkey has been a part of the coalition fighting the Islamic State. So all signs point to the Islamic State, though we haven't had a claim of responsibility, and this isn't definitive yet.
And Juan, with regard to responsibility, there is a bit of a scenario that suggests that ISIS might not be quick to claim responsibility specifically for an attack in Turkey.
Yeah, traditionally, and this is different from attacks in other parts of the world that ISIS has been responsible for. ISIS has tended not to lay claim to suicide attacks and other attacks in Turkey. Part of that has been this unsteady peace and arrangement that they've had with Turkey for some time, dating back a few years, where Turkey was much more allowed the Islamic State to use its territory in a much more liberal way. Turkey, keep in mind, has been the major thoroughfare for foreign fighters in and out of Syria. And Turkey's primary goal in the context of the conflict in Syria has been the fall of Assad. And so they've been willing to play footsie with violent Islamic extremist groups. And as a result, there has been this unsteady relationship between the Islamic State and Turkey, which has made the Islamic State a little bit more wary about attacking in Turkey and a little bit more wary about claiming it too viciously or openly.
We heard Secretary of State John Kerry toe the administration's line yesterday, made the comment that suicide attacks such as this one actually show that ISIS is losing. I want to play a bit of what he said.
It has been more than 1 year since Daesh has actually launched a full-scale military offensive. And that's because our coalition is moving forward relentlessly on every front. Now, yes, you can bomb an airport. You can blow yourself up. That's the tragedy. Daesh and others like it know that we have to get it right 24/7, 365. They have to get it right for 10 minutes or 1 hour. So it's a very different scale. And if you're desperate, and if you know you're losing, and you know you want to give up your life, then obviously you can do some harm.
Again, we should mention that Daesh is just another name for the Islamic State, suggesting again that because of territorial advances made against ISIS, that this is again evidence of the fight being taken to a new war. Though, Juan, you could also say that, well, this is the front line of this war and has been all along.
Yes, Josh, I think the secretary there is trying to put the best face on what's happening, and there's no question that there's been some success and some advance in diminishing the hold of ISIS on territory in places like Iraq. The retaking of Ramadi and Fallujah, good examples of that. But I think it's missing the point. To your question, I think the battlefield is much broader than what's happening in the deserts of Iraq or in the border areas of Syria and Iraq. The issue here is that the Islamic State sees himself as part of a broader global movement, not just holding territory in the heart of the Middle East. So they've expanded in places like Libya and West Africa and Central Asia. They've been able to launch terrorist attacks as far afield as Indonesia, devastating attacks in Beirut and now Istanbul, attacks that were coordinated and strategic in Europe. This is the battlefield for the Islamic State. And so I think for American officials, and a lot of whom with whom I've worked and have deep respect, you do want metrics of success. You do want to demonstrate that ISIS is on its heels. But the reality is that the battlefield is much broader than how the secretary is defining it. And the problem is, of course, that the battle is coming closer and closer to the heart of Western civilization, which is exactly what al-Qaeda, ISIS, and other violent Islamic extremist groups have always wanted. And to the extent that they're able to quicken the pace of this and to do this in rapid succession in major sites like the Istanbul International Airport or in the heart of Paris and Brussels, that is success, unfortunately, for the Islamic State. And we've got to do a better job of disrupting their safe haven, stopping their foreign fighter flows, and disrupting these attacks before they happen, because we cannot allow this to continue to progress.
And yet they can aim at these transit hubs that provide, if nothing else, a very target-rich environment. Juan, obviously in the aftermath of attacks such as the one we saw yesterday, there is a rush to perhaps learn as much as we can and so perhaps prevent a future attack. What are the lessons, do you think, to be learned from what we saw yesterday in Istanbul?
Well, this is an asymmetric battle. So our enemy, the terrorists, be they very organized groups or even lone wolves, are trying to find vulnerabilities in the system. And so I think the first point is that no open site is going to be fully secure. But authorities can do everything possible to try to create rings of security, checkpoints, and vigilance that allows for as much security as possible, at a minimum to minimize damage and hopefully to deter or to prevent attacks. Second, I think we have to realize that the Islamic State and even perhaps al-Qaeda have moved to a model where they're not trying the spectacular attacks of flying planes into major buildings, but trying to perpetrate these very types of attacks that can at least disrupt the economy of Western capitals and be disruptive to the psychology of major cities like Istanbul or Paris. And so that's important to keep in mind. And third is that we have to remain vigilant across the board. And as part of that, we have to have intelligence that allows us to understand where these terrorist networks are operating. Keep in mind that with Orlando was an enormous tragedy, of course, but this was an individual who was on the radar screen. And we've got to do a better job of figuring out as a society, as an international community, how we deal with known operatives, how we deal with the thousands of foreign fighters that are now motivated to attack and to attack in the West. So unfortunately, these are some harsh lessons, but it demonstrates that we have to have some urgency to our counterterrorism work, and we can't stop because the enemy is constantly adapting and constantly trying to attack us.
And it would seem is coming. It seems more than ever a question of not if, but when. Juan Zarate in Washington, we thank you for your insights.
Thank you, Josh.